In the drought-stricken borderlands of 1880s Arizona territory, a determined young physician was about to make a decision that would challenge everything she believed. What started as a simple herb-gathering expedition took a shocking turn when she came face to face with the most wanted outlaw in the region, bleeding out in a dried arroyo. Elena Suarez wasn't your typical frontier doctor. For 8 years, she had spent her life healing the desperate and destitute of Santa Rosa village, known for treating anyone who needed care, regardless of their ability to pay or their standing with the law. When she encountered the notorious Bandito Marco Vega lying unconscious with a bullet wound, she had no idea she was beginning a chain of events that would transform an entire region. Elena's decision to drag the dying man back to her clinic would lead to an unlikely alliance against corruption that threatened every drop of water in the territory. What began as a single act of medical compassion would become a revolution against those who weaponized drought for profit. The parched borderlands would never be the same after water flowed freely again, returning not just to the land, but to the hearts of those who had forgotten what it meant to hope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The clay water jug hung heavier from Elena Suarez's hand with each passing week. Once, even half filled, it had seemed a reasonable burden. Now, the meager ration inside, more precious than gold in Santa Rosa, made her grip tighten as she crossed the clinic's dusty threshold. 2 more cases of heat exhaustion yesterday, Sophia said, looking up from the medicine she ground with practiced precision. The pestle moved with deliberate rhythm in her hand, crushing herbs that had grown increasingly sparse in the surrounding hills. Old Man Vargas and the Mendez boy. Elena set down the water jug with careful reverence. And Senora Gutierrez. The fever broke before dawn. Sophia's voice softened. She'll live, though she's weak. Relief flashed across Elena's face. Good. We can't spare any more. The words hung in the stifling air, both women aware she wasn't referring to medicine. The clinic's shelves stood half empty, a visual testament to the drought's cruel mathematics. 6 months without proper rain had transformed their modest reserves into carefully rationed treasures. Each bottle of tincture, each roll of bandage held the weight of impossible choices that Elena might soon make. Whose pain to ease, whose fever to fight, whose wounds to dress. We need more willow bark, Elena said, reaching for her gathering basket. And whatever yarrow still grows in the arroyo. Sophia's dark eyes followed her movement. It's late. You should wait until morning. The fever season won't wait, Elena replied, already adjusting her hat against the still punishing afternoon sun. And neither will Comandante Reyes, if the rumors are true. Sophia's hands stilled. Then you've heard. Father Domingo mentioned soldiers were seen near Agua Fria. Elena checked the knife at her belt, a tool for cutting herbs that had, on occasion, served more urgent purposes, which means they'll reach Santa Rosa by tomorrow, perhaps the next day. Hunting Vega? Elena nodded. Marco Vega. The name alone made half the village cross themselves. The notorious Bandito, whose raids had become increasingly bold and increasingly targeted toward American mining operations and their Mexican partners. The wanted posters plastered across the region depicted a merciless killer, a thief, a man without honor. Be careful, Sophia called as Elena reached the door. They say his men were spotted in the eastern hills. I'll stay close. A half-truth. The best herbs grew in the deeper ravines, the places where scarce moisture still gathered. But Sophia knew this as well as she did, which explained her worried frown. Outside, the village seemed to wilt under the sun's assault. Adobe walls baked, to darker shades of brown, and what had once been a central plaza of packed earth now resembled a jagged puzzle of sun-cracked clay. Children who should have been playing sat listlessly in whatever scraps of shade they could find. Their mothers exchanged grim glances over empty water jugs. Elena moved purposefully through the village, nodding to those who met her eyes, pretending not to notice how many deliberately looked away. Being the only doctor in Santa Rosa had once garnered respect. Now, with her medicines running low and her miracle cures scarce, she saw more fear than reverence in their expressions. She couldn't save them all. Everyone knew it. The eastern arroyo beckoned with its promise of shadow, if not water. Elena picked her way down the crumbling bank, her practiced eye already scanning for the pale green of yarrow among the rust-colored stones. The world grew quieter here, the village sounds fading behind the ridge. She worked methodically, moving deeper into the dried riverbed, knife flashing occasionally as she harvested what few plants had survived. The gathering light shifted as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the arroyo in deepening scarlet. Elena straightened, pressing a hand against her lower back. Her basket contained a pitiful harvest. Enough perhaps for a few fever remedies, nowhere near what they needed. She turned to head back, already calculating how to stretch what she had, when something caught her eye. A darker patch among the shadows, something that didn't belong. Caution made her hesitate, but professional instinct drove her forward. 3 more steps revealed a man's body, crumpled awkwardly against the arroyo wall. Dark stains spread across his shirt. Blood, not water. Elena crouched beside him, setting down her basket to press experienced fingers against his neck. A pulse, though weak and erratic. She turned the man gently, bringing his face into the dying light. Her breath caught. Marco Vega. There was no mistaking him. The same severe profile from the wanted posters, though now slack with unconsciousness. The distinctive scar that cut through his right eyebrow, even half dead, he radiated a dangerous presence that made her hand tremble slightly against his skin. A gunshot wound pierced his side, the blood crusty and half-dried. But what would kill him faster was the dehydration. His lips were cracked beyond what seemed possible, his breathing shallow. In this heat without water, he wouldn't last till morning. Elena sat back on her heels, suddenly conscious of her own ragged heartbeat. The smart choice was clear. Leave. Him walk away. Let nature finish what someone's bullet had started. The brutality of the borderlands had its own harsh justice. Who was she to interfere? And yet, primum non nocere, she whispered, the old Latin drilling itself through her consciousness. First, do no harm. But the oath she'd taken went beyond. That simple directive. It demanded action, not mere restraint. Part of her, the practical, survival-minded part, screamed in protest as she tore a strip from her petticoat. She pressed it against his wound, then reached for her water jug. 1 swallow's worth trickled between his cracked lips. Most ran down his chin, but his throat convulsed. Living, then. Dying, but not yet dead. The rest of the water went to dampening more cloth, cooling his fever-hot skin. A temporary measure, useless without proper treatment. Elena glanced back toward the village. The distance suddenly seemed impossible with his weight to bear. But darkness would fall soon, and with it the desert cold that claimed as many lives. As the day's heat, she rose, hooking her hands beneath his shoulders, and pulled. His body moved only inches, the effort sending sweat pouring down her face. Again she pulled, gaining another half-foot. Muscles strained against a weight her frame wasn't built to carry. Dios mío, ayúdame, she muttered, not sure if she was praying for strength or forgiveness. Perhaps both. Sophia's scream strangled itself into silence when she recognized Elena dragging the half-dead man across the clinic threshold. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed, quickly shutting the door behind them. "That's Marco Vega!" "I'm aware." Elena's voice came out breathless. "From exertion. Help me get him on the table." Sophia hesitated only a moment before taking the man's feet. Together they heaved him onto the examination table, the rough wood soon stained with blood and dirt. "If anyone sees him here," Sophia began. "Then we're dead," Elena finished, already cutting away the filthy shirt to expose the wound. "So, make sure no one does." The bullet had torn through his side, missing vital organs, but leaving a jagged path through muscle and tissue. Infection had already set in, angry red streaks radiating outward. Elena worked with swift efficiency, cleaning the wound with their precious alcohol, packing it with the herbs she'd just gathered. "He needs water," she said, not looking up, "more than we can spare." Sophia handed her the needle and catgut suture without comment, then moved to the water barrel. She dipped out a full cup, more than most villagers saw in a day, and brought it to Elena's side. "You know what he is," Sophia said quietly. Elena's hands never stopped working as she stitched the wound closed. "I know what they say he is. A murderer, a thief, a man." Elena finally looked up, her eyes challenging. "Right now, just a man who will die without help." Sophia's gaze dropped first. "Your sister won't see it that way. Isabel sees the world as it should be, not as it is." Elena tied off the suture with practiced fingers. "It's both her greatest strength and her greatest weakness." As if summoned by her name, the clinic door pushed open. Elena Suarez stepped inside, her traveling cloak dusty from the road. The medicine satchel she carried marked her return from delivering remedies to the outlying farms. Her greeting died on her lips as she took in the scene before her. "Santa Madre de Dios," she whispered, the satchel slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers. Elena straightened, positioning herself between her sister and the unconscious man. "Isabel, that's him! The Bandito!" Isabel's voice rose with each word. "The devil who—" "Lower your voice!" Sophia snapped, moving to close the shutters. Isabel's eyes widened in betrayal. "You're helping her hide him? Have you both gone?" "Mad. I've gone nowhere except where my oath demands," Elena said firmly. "He needs medical care. I'm providing it. He needs a priest and a hanging rope," Isabel countered, backing toward the door. "I'm getting Father Domingo." Elena moved faster than thought, blocking her sister's retreat. "You will do no such thing. Elena, he's killed people." "So has every soldier who rides with Reyes." Elena kept her voice level with effort. "So have the Americans who force people from their land. Will you deny them treatment too?" Isabel faltered, the absolute certainty in her expression wavering. "That's different." "Is it?" Elena took her sister's hands. "I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking you to trust me." The silence stretched between them, populated by the shallow, rasping breaths of the man on the table. Finally, Isabel pulled her hands away. "I won't turn him in," she said stiffly, "but I won't help you either." She retreated to the far corner of the clinic, as though physical distance might absolve her of moral complicity. Elena returned to her patient, concern deepening as she noted his rising fever. She placed a cool cloth on his forehead, the simple gesture incongruously gentle against the harsh backdrop of their circumstance. Vega's eyes fluttered open, dark, liquid with pain and confusion. They fixed on Elena with surprising lucidity. "Healer," he rasped, the single word scraping from his throat. "Don't try to speak," Elena replied, holding water to his lips. His hand caught her wrist with unexpected strength. "Why?" The question contained multitudes. Why help him? Why risk everything? Why show mercy to a man whom mercy had long abandoned? "Because you're in my care now," she answered simply. Something like recognition flickered in his fever-bright eyes before they closed again. Outside the clinic, darkness had claimed the village. Through the thin walls came snippets of conversation as neighbors gathered at the communal well for their evening rations. One voice rose above the others. old Senora Martinez, whose son served with the Federales. Reyes himself, coming to Santa Rosa tomorrow, hunting the Bandito who raided the American mine. Sophia and Elena exchanged glances tinged with fresh fear. "We can't move him," Sophia said, glancing at their unconscious patient. "Not in this condition." Elena pulled up a chair beside the table. "Then we keep him hidden, and we wait." The night deepened around the clinic. As Elena maintained her vigil, Sophia eventually retreated to her pallet in the corner, while Isabel's rigid posture gradually softened into reluctant sleep. Only Elena remained awake, monitoring Vega's fever, changing compresses, administering tinctures when his pain grew too great. Sometime in the darkest hours, she thought she heard hoofbeats in the distance, too many for a single rider, too purposeful for travelers. Elena's hand found Vega's wrist, measuring the strengthening pulse that her care had nurtured. By morning, she might be harboring a criminal from justice. By morning, she might be facing her own death for this night's work. By morning, everything would change. She tightened her grip on his wrist and waited for dawn. Dawn crept across Santa Rosa with reluctant fingers, painting the parched adobe walls with pale gold. Elena's eyes burned from her night-long vigil, but her hands remained steady as she checked Marco Vega's wound. The fever had receded slightly, a good sign. The man's breathing had deepened, his pulse stronger than it had any right to be after what he'd endured. She moved to the wash basin, splashing tepid water on her face when the first sounds registered. Not the usual morning stirrings of the village, the creak of the well pulley, the soft calls of women beginning their day's work. No, these sounds carried purpose. The muffled clatter of weapons, the soft nickering of horses held to silence, the nearly imperceptible footfalls of men trained to move without detection. Sophia sat up from her pallet in the corner, instantly alert. "Elena?" "Someone's out there," Elena whispered, already moving to the front window. Through the thin gap in the shutters, she counted at least 6 men slipping between the village buildings. They moved with military precision, but wore no uniforms, just the dust-covered clothes of men who lived on horseback. One man led them, taller than the rest, with a distinctive red bandana knotted around his throat. He gestured with silent commands, positioning the others around the clinic like pieces on a chessboard. "Bandits," Elena said, pulling back from the window. Sophia's eyes widened, darting to the unconscious man on their examination table. His men. It has to be. Elena reached for the knife she kept near her medicines, a futile gesture against armed men, but instinct demanded something. "Wake Isabel, quietly." Sophia shook the younger woman gently. Isabel blinked awake, confusion clearing from her eyes as she registered the tension in the room. "What's happening? Vega's men, outside." Elena kept her voice low. Not a sound. Isabel's face drained of color. She made the sign of the cross, lips moving in silent prayer. A soft rapping came at the door. 3 measured knocks. Not the demanding pound of soldiers, but somehow more menacing in its restraint. Elena hesitated, the knife half hidden in the folds of her skirt. The knocking came again, insistent now. "We have no choice," Sophia whispered. "If we don't answer, they'll break it down." Elena nodded once, tucking the knife deeper into her skirt. She crossed to the door, spine straightening, chin lifting. When she pulled it open, she made sure her body blocked any view of the clinic's interior. The man with the red bandana stood before her, his face weathered by sun and hardship. Dark eyes assessed her with unsettling thoroughness. "Senora Doctora." His voice was surprisingly cultured, pitched low. "I believe you have something of ours." Elena matched his calm. "This is a clinic. I have patients, not possessions." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My cousin is not a possession, that is true. but he belongs with his people. So, this was Tomás Vega, Marco's right hand. The wanted posters mentioned him too, described him as the shadow behind Vega's operations, the strategic mind that enabled their surprising successes against superior forces. Tomás shifted slightly, and Elena caught the glint of a pistol at his hip. "We tracked him here," he continued, his tone conversational despite the implicit threat. "Blood trail leading to your door. Rather careless of you, Doctora." Elena's throat tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "If you're suggesting I'm harboring someone, I'm not suggesting anything." Tomás cut her off with a small gesture. "I'm telling you we're taking Marco with us. The only question is whether we do it peacefully." From behind, Elena came Sophia's sharp intake of breath. She could feel her friend and Isabel watching, tension radiating from them in palpable waves. "He can't be moved," Elena said firmly. "The bullet wound is infected. He's weak from blood loss and dehydration. Moving him could kill him." Something shifted in Tomás's expression, concern briefly overriding caution. "He lives then?" "Barely." Elena held his gaze. "And he needs proper care if he's to survive." Tomás studied her, calculation evident in his dark eyes. "Why would you help him? You know who he is." "I'm a doctor. He needed medical attention. Many would say he deserves to die." "Many would." Elena lifted her chin. "I'm not one of them." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unspoken judgments. Then Tomás nodded once, as if coming to a decision. "Step aside, Doctora. I need to see him." Elena considered refusing, but the men positioned around. The clinic made resistance futile. She stepped back, allowing Tomás to enter. The bandito's reaction upon seeing his cousin was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a momentary clench of his jaw, but it revealed depths of concern that surprised Elena. Tomás moved to the examination table, examining Marco's pallor, the bandaged wound, the evidence of Elena's careful treatment. "You did this?" "Not a question." "Yes." Tomás touched his cousin's forehead briefly. "Why?" It was the same question Marco had asked her in his fever. Elena gave the same answer. "Because he's in my care." Tomás turned to study her with renewed intensity. Whatever he searched for in her expression, he seemed to find it. He straightened, decision made. "Diego," he called softly. One of the men appeared at the doorway, younger than Tomás, with a face marked by a jagged scar running from temple to jaw. "Set up a perimeter. No one enters or leaves the village without our knowledge. Miguel and Carlos on the north approach. You and Javier take the south. Rafael stays with me." The man nodded, disappearing to relay the orders. "What are you doing?" Elena demanded. "Protecting our investment," Tomás replied simply. "By trapping everyone in Santa Rosa? By ensuring no one disturbs my cousin's recovery." Tomás moved to the door, scanning the stirring village. "Your people should go about their business as usual. We won't interfere unless threatened. They'll be terrified. Better terrified than dead, which is what they'll be if Reyes's men find Marco here." His voice hardened. "Or do you think your commander would distinguish between those who actively hid him and those who were simply unfortunate enough to live in the same village?" Elena had no answer. Comandante Reyes's reputation for thoroughness was well earned. Villages that harbored bandits often found themselves made into examples. In the growing light, she could see the other men taking positions throughout Santa Rosa, some on rooftops, others beside key buildings, all armed, all watching with the alertness of predators in unfamiliar territory. "You're making my clinic a target," Elena said quietly. "It became a target the moment you dragged Marco through that door," Tomás countered. "I'm simply ensuring it's a well-defended one. From the examination table came a low groan. Both Elena and Tomas turned as Marco Vega's eyes fluttered open. Confusion gave way to recognition as he registered Tomas's presence. "Primo!" he rasped, voice barely audible. Tomas moved swiftly to his side. "Don't try to talk. You've been shot." A weak smile touched Marco's cracked lips. "I noticed." His gaze shifted to Elena, standing rigid by the door. Recognition flickered there too. The healer. "Dr. Elena Suarez," Tomas supplied. "It seems she fished you out of an arroyo." Marco studied her with fevered intensity. "Why am I not dead?" "Dr. Suarez has strong opinions about letting men die in ditches." Tomas's voice carried a hint of dry humor. "Even men with prices on their heads." Marco's eyes never left Elena's face. "Then I owe her a debt." "You owe her your life," Tomas corrected. "A substantial debt indeed." Marco's attention shifted to the room, taking in Sophia and Isabel, standing frozen against the far wall, the modest clinic with its depleted supplies. Understanding seemed to dawn in his expression. "The village," he said, voice strengthening. "Protect it." Tomas frowned. "We're here for you, Marco. Once you're strong enough to move, protect the village." Each word seemed to cost him, but Marco's gaze held steel. The doctor, her people, no harm comes to them. "You're not thinking clearly. If Reyes learns—" "An order, Tomas." Marco's hand shot out, gripping his cousin's wrist with surprising strength. "They saved me. Now we save them." Tomas hesitated, clearly conflicted. Then, with a short nod, he carefully extracted his wrist from Marco's grasp. "As you wish, but I'll need more men. Send for them. It might take until nightfall. Then do it quickly." Marco's strength seemed to be fading, his eyelids growing heavy. "And Tomas." "Yes, the water. Find out what happened to the water." "Done." With those cryptic words, Marco slipped back into unconsciousness. Tomas straightened, his expression unreadable as he turned back to Elena. "It seems my cousin has complicated matters." His tone was measured, revealing nothing of his thoughts. "He wants us to protect your village," Elena found her voice. "And will you?" "Marco's word is our law." Tomas moved toward the door, even when his commands make little sense. He paused at the threshold, silhouetted against the brightening day. "He must see something in you worth saving, Doctora. For your sake, I hope he's right." With that, he was gone, leaving Elena standing in stunned silence. Sophia was the first to break it. "Santa Maria," she breathed. "They're staying." "Not just staying," Elena replied, watching through the window as Tomas spoke with his men. "Guarding us." Isabel pushed away from the wall, her face pale but composed. "You've made us complicit in whatever comes," she said, her voice tight. "God help us all." Before Elena could respond, a commotion from the village plaza drew their attention. Through the window, they could see villagers emerging from their homes, stopping in alarm at the sight of armed men positioned throughout Santa Rosa. Fearful glances, huddled conversations, parents pulling children close. The scene unfolded in painfully predictable fashion. Then, cutting through the growing tension, came Father Domingo's distinctive figure. The priest moved with deliberate calm through the plaza, his black cassock stark against the dusty earth. He approached the nearest of Marco's men without hesitation, hands open at his sides in a gesture of peaceful intent. Elena couldn't hear the exchange, but she watched Father Domingo's measured gestures, the surprising respectfulness with which the Bandito responded. The conversation lengthened, the villagers watching in tense silence. After several minutes, Father Domingo turned to address the gathering crowd, his voice too distant for Elena to catch. "What's he telling them?" Sophia wondered, pressing closer to the window. Isabel's expression softened slightly. Knowing Father Domingo, the truth. Elena watched as the priest continued speaking, his hands making the shapes of his familiar benediction. Gradually, the villagers' postures changed, not relaxing entirely, but shifting from terror to wary acceptance. Several nodded. A few crossed themselves. Slowly they began to disperse, returning to their morning routines, though with frequent glances toward their unexpected guardians. "He's bought us time," Elena murmured, "but when Reyes comes..." "When Reyes comes, we'll face that too," Sophia said with unexpected firmness. "One crisis at a time, Elena." A small sound from the doorway made them turn. A young boy stood there, Miguel Ortiz, 10 years old, son of the village baker. His eyes were huge as he took in the wounded man on the table. "Miguel!" Elena moved quickly to intercept him. "What are you doing here?" The boy clutched a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Mama sent bread," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "She said the doctor needs strength to heal the sick." Elena accepted the bundle, feeling the still warm loaf inside, a precious gift in these times of scarcity. "Thank your mother for..." "Me?" Miguel's eyes remained fixed on Marco. "Is it true?" he whispered. "Is that really El Cazador?" The hunter, one of Marco Vega's many names among the villagers, earned, it was said, for his relentless pursuit of those who wronged his people. "You shouldn't be here, Miguel," Elena said gently, guiding him toward the door. "Go home to your mother." The boy resisted slightly. "The men with guns, they work for him." "Yes. Are they going to hurt us?" Elena crouched to meet his eyes. "No, Miguel. They're here to protect us." The boy absorbed this with a child's pragmatism. Like the story of San Jorge, the dragon that guarded the village. Despite everything, Elena felt a smile touch her lips. Something like that. Miguel nodded, accepting her explanation with the simple faith of childhood. "Good. Mama says we need protection from the soldiers." With that unsettling insight, he slipped away, darting between the buildings with the easy confidence of a child in his familiar territory. "The whole village will know within the hour," Sophia predicted, taking the bread from Elena's hands and breaking off a piece for each of them. "They already know," Isabel said, accepting her portion. "Father Domingo saw to that." Elena returned to Marco's side, noting with professional satisfaction that his color had improved slightly. The brief awakening seemed to have exhausted him, but his breathing remained steady. With careful hands, she changed his bandages, cleaning the wound with their precious antiseptic. "What did he mean about the water?" Sophia asked, watching her work. "Find out what happened to the water." Elena shook her head. "I don't know. Fever talk, perhaps. Or perhaps not," Isabel said thoughtfully. "The drought came suddenly, didn't it? Too suddenly for nature alone." Elena paused in her ministrations. It was true. Santa Rosa had weathered dry periods before, but this drought had descended with unnatural swiftness, as if someone had simply turned off the rivers and springs that had sustained the region for generations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A commotion outside interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she saw a rider galloping into the village, dust billowing behind him. One of Vega's men, the one called Rafael, intercepted him, speaking urgently. The rider nodded repeatedly, then spurred his horse toward the clinic. Elena moved to the door, opening it as the man dismounted in a fluid motion that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. "Dr. Suarez?" he asked, his accent marking him as from further south. "Yes. Message from our scouts." He glanced toward the table where Marco lay. "Reyes and his men were seen crossing the San Miguel Valley. They'll be here by midday. Tomorrow." Cold dread pooled in Elena's stomach. "How many?" 20, maybe more, and they're riding hard." From behind her, Sophia's voice came soft but resolute. "Then we have 1 day to prepare." The rider nodded grimly. "1 day, and they call Reyes the Bloodhound for a reason, Senora." Elena turned to look at Marco Vega, the wounded predator who had transformed overnight from patient to protector. In saving his life, she had set forces in motion that threatened everything and everyone she loved. Yet watching Tomas as he strode purposefully through Santa Rosa, organizing his men with quiet efficiency, she saw something unexpected. Not just the cold calculation of outlaws protecting their leader, but the disciplined response of men defending something they believed in. Something Marco had commanded with his few feverish words, the protection of people who had shown him mercy when the world had offered none. By midnight, Vega's reinforcements had arrived, another dozen men who moved, like shadows, into the village, taking positions with practiced ease. Elena watched from her doorway as Tomas greeted them, explaining the situation in low, urgent tones. Several glanced toward the clinic, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Tomas approached her, his manner formal. "My men need to know why we're risking our lives for Santa Rosa." "Because Marco ordered it," Elena replied simply. Tomas shook his head. "They need more than that. They need to understand what happened here." Elena hesitated, then stepped aside. "Show them, then." She led Tomas and 3 of his lieutenants into the clinic, where Marco still lay unconscious, his breathing steady but shallow. The men removed their hats as they entered, a gesture of respect that surprised her. "I found him in the arroyo," Elena explained, keeping her voice clinical. "Gunshot wound, severe dehydration. He would have died there if left untreated." One of the men, older than the others, with silver threading his dark beard, stepped forward to study Marco's face. "And you knew who he was?" "Yes. Yet you saved him anyway." The man's weathered face creased in a puzzled frown. "Why?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because that's what healers do." The man studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. He turned to Tomas, speaking in a voice heavy with certainty. "Marco was right. This village is worth defending." Tomas seemed to come to a decision. "Diego, organize watches, 4-hour rotations. I want men on every approach. Rafael, coordinate with the villagers. We need to know every cellar, every hiding place." The men nodded, filing out to execute their orders. Tomas lingered, his attention returning to Elena. "Get some rest, Doctora," he said, his voice softening slightly. "Tomorrow will test us all." Elena watched him go, then turned back to her patient. Marco's eyes were open, observing her with a clarity that suggested his fever had broken. "Your men are preparing for war," she said quietly. Marco's lips curved in a pained smile. "My men are preparing to keep a promise you made in delirium. A debt I owe in blood." He shifted slightly, wincing. "You gave me water when I was dying. By morning my men guard your every step. It seems a fair exchange." Elena shook her head, unable to fully suppress a smile at his audacity. "Most people simply say thank you. I'm not most people." His eyes held hers, unexpectedly earnest. "And neither are you, Elena Suarez." Outside, the village settled into an uneasy quiet, punctuated by the soft movements of its new guardians. Dawn would bring Reyes and his soldiers, hunting for the man who lay in Elena's clinic. But for now, in the strange stillness of this transformed night, Santa Rosa slept under the protection of men it had been taught to fear, men who now stood watch because a healer had offered water to their wounded leader. Elena pulled her chair closer to Marco's bedside and settled in for another vigil, wondering what new impossibilities the morning would bring. The morning after Tomas and his men arrived, Elena found herself in the unusual position of having to explain to Comandante Reyes's messenger why he couldn't enter Santa Rosa. The young soldier shifted nervously under the steady gaze of the two bandits flanking the village entrance, his official dispatch clutched tightly in his hand. "It's a matter of public health," Elena explained, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she'd perfected during epidemics. "We have cases of typhus. Quite contagious. I've advised a quarantine until the danger passes." The soldier's eyes darted between Elena and the armed men. "The Comandante will want verification." "Of course," Elena replied smoothly. "Tell him Dr. Suarez has implemented Protocol 6 from the Mexico City Medical Directive. He can confirm the procedure with the Regional Health Office." There was no such directive, but the soldier wasn't likely to know that. He nodded, clearly relieved to have an excuse to retreat, and spurred his horse back toward Agua Fria. "Typhus?" Tomas asked when the soldier disappeared over the ridge. "Creative," Elena shrugged. "It buys us time, not much, but some." She returned to the clinic where Marco sat propped against pillows. His complexion improved after a night of proper rest. The bullet wound was healing remarkably well, though movement still caused him pain. He watched with undisguised interest as Elena prepared fresh bandages. "Your hands are steady," he observed, "even when lying to federal soldiers." A smile tugged at her lips. A doctor's hands must remain steady under all circumstances. And what circumstances led a woman educated in Mexico City to this forgotten corner of the borderlands? Marco winced slightly as she began removing his old bandages. Elena's hands paused momentarily. "You know about my education? Your sister mentioned it. Between prayers for my soul." Despite herself, Elena chuckled. "Isabel believes in salvation, even for men like you. Men like me." Marco repeated the words without inflection. "And what kind of man am I, Dr. Suarez?" Elena resumed her work, cleaning the healing wound with practiced efficiency. "A violent one, a man who takes what he wants through force." "Is that what the wanted posters say?" "The posters call you many things, most too crude to repeat in polite company." Marco laughed, then immediately grimaced in pain. "There is truth in them. I have killed men. I have stolen property. I have burned buildings to the ground." His eyes held hers, refusing to flinch from his own admission. "Would you like to know why?" Elena finished securing the fresh bandage before answering. "Yes." Outside, the sounds of the village filtered through the open window. Women at the well, children playing a subdued game of chase, the rhythmic chopping of firewood, life continuing, even under the watchful eyes of outlaws. "I owned land," Marco began, his voice distant with memory. 3,000 acres north of here, good land. My father's land and his father's before him. We raised horses, cattle, employed 20 families." His jaw tightened. "Then the American mining companies came. They wanted our water rights." Elena sat beside him, listening. "William Harding led them, charming man, Harvard education, impeccable Spanish. He offered to buy us out. When we refused, there were accidents, cattle poisoned, mysterious fires." Marco's hand clenched on the blanket. "My father went to the authorities. They did nothing. Because they'd been paid," Elena guessed. Marco nodded. "Harding's company made generous contributions to the regional government. When legal intimidation failed, they resorted to more direct methods. Men came in the night. My father was shot defending our home. My mother..." "Guy," his voice faltered. "They said she took her own life afterward, from grief." "And your wife?" Elena asked quietly. Pain flashed across Marco's face, rawer than any physical wound. "Luz was with child when they came. The shock. They told me neither survived." His eyes closed briefly. "I buried 3 coffins that week. So you became a bandito to seek revenge." "I became a bandito because there was no justice to be found through law." Marco shifted, looking out the window. The first men I killed were those who murdered my father. The second group were the officials who let them escape punishment. After that, he shrugged, labels come easily once blood has been spilled. Elena absorbed his story, seeing how it aligned with patterns she'd witnessed throughout the borderlands, American commercial interests claiming what they wanted, supported by corrupt officials on both sides of the border. "And the water?" she asked, remembering his words to Tomas. Marco's gaze sharpened. "Your drought is no accident, Doctor. Harding's mining operations require massive amounts of water. They've been damming and diverting streams throughout the region. Villages wither while their mines flourish." Before Elena could respond, the clinic door opened as Sophia entered with a tray of food, thin porridge and hard bread, the best that could be managed in these lean times. "Your men are digging in the western arroyo," she informed Marco, setting down the tray with a forceful clatter that betrayed her lingering disapproval. "Half the village has gone to watch." Marco accepted the bowl she thrust at him. "Tomas follows my orders." "And what orders were those?" Elena asked. "To find what happened to your water." He sipped the porridge without complaint, though Elena knew it was barely more than hot water with a few grains of corn, and to help where help is needed. By midday, word had spread through Santa Rosa. Tomas and several bandits had discovered the remains of a small dam hidden in the western arroyo, crude but effective, blocking the underground spring that had once fed the village's wells. More significantly, they'd found company markers bearing the insignia of Harding Minerals. Elena watched from the clinic doorway as Tomas organized villagers and his own men into work groups. Some cleared the blockage, while others began digging a new well where he indicated the water would be closest to the surface. The sight was surreal. Outlaws working alongside villagers, passing tools, sharing water rations, united in a common purpose. "He's clever," a voice observed beside her. Isabel had returned from the church, her expression thoughtful as she watched the activity. "You're Bandito's cousin." "Tomas seems to know about water sources," Elena agreed. "I meant he's clever in how he wins people's trust." Isabel's tone held less judgment than Elena expected. "Though I admit, finding that dam changes things." Elena studied her sister's face. "Changes what?" "The drought. I thought it was God's will, a punishment, or a test." Isabel's eyes tracked a group of children following one of the bandits, pestering him with questions that he answered with surprising patience. "But if men caused it?" "Then men can end it," Elena finished. "Even men we've been taught to fear." Isabel didn't respond immediately. Finally she said, "I saw one of them, the one they called Diego, give his water ration to old Senora Jimenez. She blessed him, and he crossed himself afterward." She sounded genuinely perplexed. "Bandits who believe in God's blessing, I don't know what to make of it." "Perhaps," Elena suggested gently, "they're just men. Not saints, not demons. Just men making choices, some good, some terrible." Isabel's gaze drifted to Marco, visible through the clinic window, as he attempted to stand with Sophia's reluctant assistance. "Even him?" "Especially him." A shout from the new well interrupted their conversation. Elena hurried toward the commotion, Isabel close behind. A crowd had gathered around the excavation where Tomas stood knee-deep in the circular pit. As Elena pushed her way forward, she saw what had caused the excitement: mud, dark, wet earth where previously there had been only dust. "Water," Tomas confirmed, holding up a handful of the precious mud. "Not much yet, but it's rising." A cheer went up from the villagers, a sound Elena hadn't heard in months. Children danced around the site while adults clasped hands in prayer or relief. Elena found herself smiling, despite the persistent danger hanging over them all. That evening, as the sun set over Santa Rosa, the mood had transformed. A small stream of water now trickled into the new well. Not abundance, but hope made tangible. The bandits had risen in the villagers' estimation from necessary evil to cautious allies. In the clinic, Elena found Marco standing unassisted, though leaning heavily against the examination table. His color was better, his movements stronger, healing progressing faster than she'd dared hope. "You should be resting," she scolded, moving to support him. "I've rested enough." His hand found her shoulder, warm and surprisingly gentle. "Tell me about the well." She described the day's developments, watching his face as understanding of what his men had accomplished registered. "It won't be enough," he said finally. "The small dam is just one of many. Harding's main operation diverts the river north of here, a massive structure. Without that water restored." "One crisis at a time," Elena echoed Sophia's words from earlier. "Today we have water. Tomorrow." She shrugged. Marco studied her face. "You're an unusual woman, Dr. Suarez. Because I don't faint at the sight of blood. Because you see hope where others see only disaster." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Elena stepped back, suddenly conscious of his hand still resting on her shoulder, of the impropriety of their isolation. "Your methods," she said, abruptly, "the violence, surely there are other ways to fight injustice." Marco's expression hardened. "I tried other ways. My father tried law. My neighbors tried petitions. The only language men like Harding understand is force." "And what does that make you?" Elena challenged, "when you match their violence with your own?" "Effective," he replied simply. "At what cost to yourself?" She gestured to his wound. "To your men, to the innocents caught between sides." Marco had no immediate answer. For the first time since she'd met him, he seemed genuinely unsettled. A commotion outside saved him from responding. Elena moved to the window to see a rider galloping into the village, one of Marco's scouts, his horse lathered from hard riding. Tomas intercepted the man, listening intently to his report. Even from a distance, Elena could read the sudden tension in his posture. Within moments, Tomas was at the clinic door. "Reyes," he said without preamble. "He's been to Tres Piedras. 2 men hanged for refusing to give information about your whereabouts." Marco straightened, pain forgotten. "Civilians, the blacksmith, and the cantina owner." Tomas's expression was grim. "The scout says they put the bodies on display. A warning to the next village." Elena felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Tres Piedras was less than 20 miles away. "He's making an example," Marco said, voice tight with anger. "Terrorizing people who know nothing." Tomas nodded. His scouts were seen in the eastern hills this afternoon, watching Santa Rosa. Elena moved to Marco's side, medical instinct taking over. "You need to sit. Your wound—" "My wound is healing," Marco cut her off, though he allowed her to help him to a chair. "But our time is running out." Through the window, they could see Sophia returning from the well, a precious jug of clean water in her hands. Children played nearby, their earlier exuberance tempered, but not extinguished by the presence of armed men throughout their village. An elderly couple sat together in the shade, sharing a cup of water between them, with the reverence reserved for sacramental wine. "All these people," Elena said softly. "What happens to them when Reyes arrives?" Marco's eyes met hers. The cold calculation of a hunted man warring with something deeper, something she hadn't expected to find in a notorious outlaw. Conscience, perhaps, or compassion. "That," he said at last, "depends on whether I can walk." By morning, Elena assessed him professionally. "You can walk now. Fighting is another matter." "I don't need to fight." Marco rose again, testing his strength. "I just need to lead Reyes away from here." "Self-sacrifice, Marco?" Tomas asked from the doorway, his tone suggesting this was an old argument. "It won't work. Reyes knows. You were here. He'll make an example of Santa Rosa regardless. Then what do you suggest? Marco demanded. Tomás glanced at Elena, then back to his cousin. We make our stand here, with these people. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Elena thought of all that had transpired in just 2 days. Enemies becoming protectors, suspicious villagers finding common cause with bandits, water flowing where there had been only dust. Improbable transformations born from a single act of mercy beside an empty riverbed. A stand, she repeated, testing the concept. Against federal troops. Against injustice, Marco corrected, his eyes never leaving hers. Isn't that what you wanted? A way to fight that doesn't require becoming the monster you fear? Before she could answer, Isabel appeared at the door, her eyes wide with alarm. Riders on the North Ridge, she said breathlessly. Soldiers. Tomás was already moving, calling orders to his men. Marco pushed himself upright, reaching for the pistol Tomás had left on the table. Not yet, he said, answering Elena's unspoken question. Just scouts. But Reyes won't be far behind. Elena looked from Marco to the village beyond the window, weighing impossibilities. The fragile peace of the past 2 days balanced against the approaching storm. The unlikely alliance between healer and outlaw that had transformed her world. Then we have work to do, she said simply, and reached for her medical kit. Comandante Arturo Reyes entered Santa Rosa like a conquering hero. Back straight, uniform immaculate despite the dust, 20 soldiers arrayed behind him in disciplined formation. The morning sun glinted off polished buttons and the brass insignia at his collar. He wore authority as comfortably as other men wore their skin. Quite the reception, he remarked to Elena, who waited at the village entrance with Father Domingo and the village elders. One might think you weren't pleased to see federal protection arrive. We're cautious by necessity, Comandante, Elena replied, careful to keep her tone respectful. These are difficult times. Indeed. Reyes's eyes scanned the gathered. Villagers missing nothing. Typhus, I was told. A minor outbreak, contained now. Excellent news. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you won't mind if my men conduct a thorough inspection, standard procedure in areas where illness has been reported. Father Domingo stepped forward. Of course, Comandante. Santa Rosa has nothing to hide. The lie hung between them, wrapped in clerical authority. While the soldiers dispersed through the village, Reyes remained with Elena and the village leaders, his manner cordial but probing. He asked about recent visitors, unusual activities, water supplies, ordinary questions made extraordinary by what lay beneath them. We've had reports, he said casually, of bandits in the region. Marco Vega's men, to be precise. Elena managed a look of appropriate concern. We've heard rumors, of course. Nothing more. Rumors, Reyes repeated. Tell me, Dr. Suarez, in your professional capacity, what would you do if a wounded outlaw appeared at your door seeking treatment? A direct challenge. Elena met his gaze steadily. My oath requires me to treat all who need medical care. Comandante, regardless of their crimes, the law may judge after I heal. That is the proper order of things. Reyes studied her face, searching for deception. Whatever he found or didn't find caused him to nod slightly. A principled position, though principles become luxuries in times of unrest. The next hours unfolded with excruciating slowness. Soldiers moved methodically through Santa Rosa, searching homes, questioning residents. They found nothing. No bandits, no weapons beyond typical farming tools, no evidence of Marco Vega's presence. What they couldn't see was the network of cramped cellars beneath the village, storage spaces connected by narrow passages, now housing Tomás and his men. Marco himself was hidden in the most secure location, below the church altar, in a space Father Domingo claimed had once hidden priests during persecutions decades earlier. By mid-afternoon, a new complication arrived. A contingent of American soldiers led by Captain James Miller, a tall man with a weathered face and the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much frontier justice. Observational capacity only. He explained to Reyes as they met in the village plaza, "My government has interests in the region." "Of course," Reyes replied smoothly. "The cooperation between our nations is vital." Elena, watching from the clinic doorway, noted the tension beneath their formal exchange. Miller's presence, or surveillance, clearly displeased Reyes, though he masked it well. Any hope that the American presence might moderate Reyes's methods proved short-lived. As afternoon stretched toward evening, his questioning grew harsher. 2 villagers were detained for suspicious responses, held in the small building that served as Santa Rosa's jail. Others were questioned repeatedly about the new well, about visitors, about the movements of Elena and Father Domingo in recent days. Sofia found Elena organizing medical supplies, a task that kept her hands busy while her mind raced. "They're searching the clinic next," she warned in a whisper. "The soldier by the well told Miguel's mother." Elena nodded, glancing at the trapdoor hidden beneath the examination table, the entrance to the cellar where 3 of Marco's wounded men had been concealed. "We're prepared." When the soldiers arrived, Elena received them with professional courtesy, opening cabinets and storage chests without hesitation. Their search was perfunctory. These men had no real interest in medical equipment. They were hunting men, not medicines. As evening approached, a new arrival drew everyone's attention, a fine carriage escorted by private guards, incongruously elegant against Santa Rosa's humble backdrop. William Harding stepped down, dressed for a social occasion rather than a military operation. His handshake with Reyes was warm, familiar, the greeting of old associates. "Mr. Harding," Reyes announced to the gathered villagers, "has generously offered his company's assistance in our efforts to capture the bandits terrorizing this region." Harding smiled magnanimously. "The stability of the borderlands benefits us all." The theatrical performance continued as Reyes accepted Elena's invitation to dine at her home, an invitation he had effectively dictated. Captain Miller and Harding would join them, along with Father Domingo and the village mayor. Isabel and Sofia would serve the meal, allowing them to observe while remaining safely peripheral. Elena's small home had never felt more confined than with these men seated around her table. The meal was humble, stretched by Sofia's ingenuity to appear more substantial than it was, but the conversation was rich with subtext and danger. "This drought has been devastating," Harding remarked, accepting wine from Isabel with barely a glance at her. "My company has considered ways we might assist the affected communities." "How generous," Elena replied, careful to keep irony from her tone. "Progress requires resources," Harding continued. "Water chief among them. The mining operations that bring prosperity to this region have substantial needs." Father Domingo cleared his throat. "Prosperity seems to flow in very specific directions, Senor Harding." Harding's smile tightened. "Development is never without its discomforts, Father. But I assure you, the future I envision for this region includes Santa Rosa with the proper cooperation." "Speaking of cooperation," Reyes interjected, turning to Elena, "I find it curious that a new well should appear so suddenly after months of drought." Elena felt the trap closing. "We were fortunate to find water." "Remarkably fortunate," Reyes agreed, "almost as if someone with specialized knowledge assisted you." Captain Miller, who had been silent throughout most of the meal, finally spoke. "Water finding is hardly a criminal skill, Comandante. Many frontiersmen possess it." "Indeed." Reyes inclined his head toward Miller. "Though in this region such skills often accompany less savory talents." Isabel, passing behind Reyes with a serving dish, faltered slightly. Elena saw her sister's knuckles whiten around the ceramic. For a terrifying moment, it seemed Isabel's conscience might overpower her newfound pragmatism. Then Father Domingo coughed, a deliberate distraction, and the moment passed. "The bandits you seek," Elena said, drawing Reyes's attention back. To her, what evidence connects them to Santa Rosa? "Blood trails don't lie, Doctor." Reyes dabbed his lips with a napkin. "My men tracked Vega to this village before losing the trail. Quite abruptly, I might add, almost as if someone had deliberately obscured it." The accusation hung in the air. Elena maintained her composure with effort. "What puzzles me," Reyes continued, his voice dangerously pleasant, "is why a village would protect a man like Vega, unless, of course, they had something to gain from his particular vendetta." Harding shifted slightly. "Comandante, perhaps—" "Illuminating theory," Miller interrupted, "though I've yet to see evidence supporting it." Reyes's smile was cold. "Evidence accumulates, Captain, as do consequences for those who obstruct justice." From beneath their feet came the faintest sound, a creak of wood, quickly silenced. Only Elena, seated directly above the hiding place, heard it. She reached for her wineglass, intentionally knocking it over. "My apologies," she said, as Sophia hurried to mop up the spill. The momentary commotion covered any further sounds. When the meal concluded, Reyes escorted Harding back to his carriage, leaving Miller behind. The American captain lingered, watching. Elena with an unreadable expression. "You're playing a dangerous game, Dr. Suarez," he said quietly. Elena stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." Miller glanced toward the church where Father Domingo had retreated. "I've seen villages like this destroyed for less. Reyes doesn't make empty threats. Is that concern, Captain, or a threat of your own?" Miller's weathered face revealed a flash of something like regret. "An observation. Whatever you're hiding, whoever you're hiding, Reyes won't stop until he finds them." With that cryptic warning, he followed the others into the night. Later, in the darkness of her home, Elena met with Father Domingo, Sophia, and Isabel. The priest's expression was grave. "Marco knows," he whispered, "about Harding being here, about his connection to Reyes." "How?" Elena asked. "I told him." Father Domingo's usually gentle eyes hardened. "He deserves to know who threatens his people." "And what did he say?" Sophia pressed. "That tomorrow will change everything." The priest hesitated. "Elena, there's something else. One of Reyes's men searched the church records, birth certificates, death records. He was particularly interested in those related to Marco's family." Elena frowned. "Why would—" A pounding at the door interrupted her. They froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Elena moved to answer it, composing her features into a mask of calm inquiry. Reyes stood on her threshold, flanked by soldiers. Behind him, in the village plaza, more troops were assembling. The false courtesy of dinner had vanished, replaced by cold authority. "A productive evening, Doctor," he said without preamble. "We've discovered inconsistencies in several villagers' accounts, and your new well bears industrial tool marks, quite sophisticated for peasant farmers." Elena said nothing, waiting. "Until the truth emerges," Reyes continued, "I've ordered water rations restricted. The well will be under guard. Each household will receive 1 jug per day." "That's barely enough for drinking," Elena protested. "The children, the elderly, their suffering is regrettable but necessary. Perhaps it will loosen stubborn tongues." Reyes's smile was thin. "Consider this an incentive for cooperation, Doctor. The drought returns to Santa Rosa until Marco Vega is delivered to me." He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Dr. Suarez, you'll be pleased to know we've arranged appropriate quarters for you and your sister, as our guests, of course, for your own protection. Elena recognized the euphemism for what it was, house arrest or worse. From the shadows beside her home, she glimpsed Captain Miller watching the exchange, his face troubled in the torchlight. Beneath them all, in the stifling darkness of Santa Rosa's hidden cellars, Marco Vega and his men waited. Coiled tension, ready to spring, the village had become a battlefield where the weapons were words and water, and no one could claim the moral high ground without sacrifice. Elena watched Reyes walk away, back straight, authority unquestioned. She thought of Marco's words. The only language men like Harding understand is force. Perhaps the same was true of men like Reyes. But as she closed her door against the night, Elena wondered what such force would cost them all. Part 5. The Water Conspiracy. Elena's quarters proved to be her own home with a guard posted outside. A small mercy compared to what Reyes might have done. She used this limited freedom to continue her medical rounds, though always under watchful eyes. 3 days into Reyes's occupation, she had catalogued the damage. 6 men taken for questioning, 2 families evicted to house soldiers, and the village's newly discovered well reduced to a trickle under strict rationing. At dawn on the 4th day, Reyes made his intentions clearer. Labor recruitment, he called it, addressing the assembled villagers in the plaza. Harding Minerals has generously offered employment to those who demonstrate proper cooperation with authorities. Elena watched from the clinic doorway as 20 men, most of the village's able-bodied males, were loaded onto wagons. Their families clustered nearby, silent tears tracking down dust-coated faces. They'll be well treated, Harding assured her as he supervised the loading. He had lingered in Santa Rosa, establishing an impromptu office in the mayor's home. Good wages for honest work. Forced labor is neither honest nor well compensated, Elena replied, keeping her voice low. Harding's smile never wavered. Strong words, Doctor. I'd be careful with those, given your precarious position. As the wagons departed, Sophia slipped to Elena's side. Miguel's father, she whispered. He saw guards leading 3 men in chains. At the mine yesterday, former laborers who tried to leave. Elena felt cold rage building beneath her carefully maintained composure. We need to see for ourselves. The opportunity came unexpectedly that afternoon. A messenger arrived from one of Harding's foremen. A worker had been injured in a rockfall. Elena was summoned to treat him, with Sophia as her assistant. Under Reyes's wary permission, they departed with an escort of 2 soldiers. The mine complex sprawled across what had once been fertile valley land, 5 miles north of Santa Rosa. As they approached, Elena saw what Marco had described, a massive dam spanning the river that should have fed the region's watershed. Behind, it stretched an artificial lake, its water diverted through channels to serve the mining operation. Impressive engineering, one of the soldiers remarked. Criminal engineering, Elena thought, but kept silent. Inside the mine compound, they were escorted to a makeshift infirmary where the injured worker lay. His leg had been crushed, a mining cart accident, not a rockfall as reported. As Elena worked to stabilize him for transport, Sophia moved throughout the space, ostensibly gathering supplies but actually observing everything: guard positions, water channels, the nervous posture of workers who wouldn't meet their eyes. When they departed an hour later, they carried more than just their patient. They carried knowledge, the precise location of the main water diversion, the guard schedules. Sophia had overheard the layout of the compound. We need to get this information to Tomas, Elena murmured, as their wagon rattled back toward Santa Rosa. But first they faced an unexpected ally. Captain Miller intercepted Elena near the church that evening. His approach was casual, but his eyes constantly scanned for observers. I need to speak with you, he said quietly. Alone. Elena hesitated, then nodded toward the church door. Inside, the sanctuary stood empty, save for Isabel, arranging candles at the altar. She withdrew discreetly at Elena's signal. I saw them. Today, Miller said without preamble. At the mine, a boy no more than 16 being whipped for dropping a load of ore. Elena said nothing, waiting. This isn't why I came to the border. Miller's voice held controlled rage. I was told we were protecting American interests from bandits and ensuring peaceful development. And now, Miller's weathered face tightened. Now I see the bandits may not be who I was told they were, and development apparently means stealing resources and enslaving locals. Why tell me this, Captain? He met her eyes directly. Because you know where Vega is, and I think I've been fighting on the wrong side. The admission hung between them. Elena calculated risks, measured the man's sincerity, and made her decision. Come back at midnight. Use the side door. That night, while Santa Rosa slept, under occupation, 3 figures moved through the narrow passage beneath the church altar. Elena, Father Domingo, and Captain Miller. They emerged into a larger cellar where Marco, Tomas, and 2 lieutenants waited. The meeting that followed was tense, distrustful at first, then gradually united by shared purpose. The dam controls everything, Marco explained, indicating a rough map Tomas had drawn. Break it and the water returns to its natural course. It's heavily guarded, Miller countered. At least 15 men, plus regular patrols. We have 20 fighters concealed in the village, Tomas said. More could come from the hills. And the moment you move, Reyes will execute hostages. Miller's assessment was cold, but accurate. He's not a man who bluffs. Elena, who had remained silent, finally spoke. What if Reyes and his men were called away? A diversion significant enough to draw their attention. Marco watched her with growing respect. What kind of diversion? A bandit attack, she replied. Not here, but at Harding's main office in Agua Fria. The plan took shape between them. Audacious, desperate, terribly risky. Miller would provide crucial details about federal patrol schedules. Marco's men would split into 2 forces. One to create the diversion, one to destroy the dam. Timing would be essential. If we succeed, Marco said, eyes fixed on the map, more than just Santa Rosa benefits. Every village downstream sees their water return. And if we fail, Miller added grimly, we all hang. In the days that followed, Elena operated within a web of dangerous connections. Isabel, who had fully embraced their resistance, monitored the soldiers' routines and created a detailed schedule of guard changes. Sophia, taking medicines to outlying homes, passed messages to Marco's lookouts in the hills. Even Father Domingo played his part, using confession to gather intelligence from Reyes's Catholic soldiers. 5 days after their initial meeting, Elena returned to the church at dusk, carrying medical supplies that concealed maps and timetables. She slipped into the confessional, their established exchange point, and waited for Miller's tap on the wooden panel. Instead, the church door crashed open. Boots echoed on stone as soldiers entered. "Search everything," came Reyes's voice, coldly furious. She was seen entering. Elena's heart pounded as footsteps approached her hiding place. The confessional door yanked open, revealing Reyes himself, his eyes narrowed with triumphant suspicion. "Dr. Suarez," he said softly, "how devout you've become of late." She maintained her composure with supreme effort. "I find comfort in faith during difficult times, Comandante." "Indeed, and what other comforts have you sought?" His hand shot out, seizing her medical bag before she could protest. He rifled through it, finding nothing incriminating. She had hidden the documents in a hollow prayer book left at the altar. Reyes's disappointment was evident, but his suspicion remained undiminished. "You've been observed, Doctor. multiple night excursions, conversations with my men. I had hoped your intelligence would prevent such foolishness. I'm a physician, Elena replied steadily. People fall ill at all hours. From this moment, Reyes continued as if she hadn't spoken, you will be under constant guard. No more medical rounds without escort. No more church visits unaccompanied. His smile was terrible in its calm certainty. Whatever you're planning, Dr. Suarez, it ends now. He stalked away, leaving 2 soldiers flanking her. Elena's mind raced. Their communication network was compromised. The timetable threatened. Everything they had planned now hung by a thread. Later that night, under her guard's watchful eyes, Elena received an unexpected visitor. Isabel arrived with a basket of laundry, her manner appropriately subdued for a sister bringing comforts to the confined. From Senora Gutierrez, Isabel explained to the guards, clean linens for the doctor. They searched the basket perfunctorily, finding nothing suspicious in the carefully folded cloth. Only when Isabel bent to arrange the linens in Elena's chest did she whisper, "It's happening tomorrow. Miller couldn't warn you directly." Elena maintained her neutral expression. "Thank Senora Gutierrez for me." After Isabel departed, Elena unfolded the linens and found what she'd missed in her earlier search, the hollow prayer book, somehow rescued from the church and concealed among the laundry. Inside, along with their plans, lay a folded note she didn't recognize. She opened it cautiously, reading the unfamiliar handwriting, to Marco Vega. I am alive. So is our daughter, coming to you now by way of Tres Piedras. Have faith, my love. Luz. Elena stared at the paper, its implications staggering. Marco's wife, the woman he believed murdered years ago, was alive, with a child, and heading straight toward danger. Before she could process this revelation, shouts erupted outside. Through her window, Elena saw a soldier running toward Reyes's headquarters. Something had happened, something significant enough to cause alarm. Within minutes, the village erupted into activity. Orders shouted, horses saddled. From fragments of conversation, Elena pieced together the crisis. Raiders had been spotted approaching Agua Fria, where Harding's main office contained payroll and documentation. Reyes was mobilizing, exactly as they had planned. But now, with Luz's message burning in her hand, Elena realized their carefully constructed plan had collided with a personal bombshell that could shake Marco's resolve at the most critical moment. As soldiers galloped from the village, Elena clutched the letter and whispered a prayer that seemed painfully ironic given their conspiracy. God help us all. Elena waited until her guards grew distracted by the commotion of Reyes's departure before slipping through the shadows to the church. The small side door, normally locked, yielded to her touch. Inside, only a few votive candles illuminated the sanctuary. She moved swiftly to the altar, tapping twice on the wooden floor in the pattern they had established. The hidden panel slid open, revealing Marco's face in the dim light. His expression shifted from wariness to relief when he recognized her. "They've gone," she whispered. "Almost all of them, just as we planned." Marco nodded, pulling himself up from the cramped cellar. He moved with increasing strength. The wound that had brought him to her nearly healed. Tomas reports the diversion worked perfectly. Our men attacked Harding's office, then disappeared into the hills. Reyes took the bait. He paused, studying her face. Something's wrong. Eleanor drew the letter from her pocket, hesitating only a moment before placing it in his hands. "This came for you." Marco unfolded the paper, his expression unreadable in the dim light. As he read, Elena watched emotions cascade across his face. Disbelief, shock, confusion, and finally a wild, desperate hope. "Luz," he whispered, the single word carrying years of grief and longing. "Alive. And your child," Elena added softly. Marco's hand trembled. A daughter. I have a daughter. His voice broke on the word. He stared at the letter as if it might dissolve. A fever dream that couldn't withstand scrutiny. How is this possible? I buried them. Empty coffins, perhaps, Elena suggested, or a ruse to protect them from Harding. Marco pressed a fist against his mouth, containing emotions too powerful for words. Elena stood silent, allowing him this moment of private revelation, though her own heart twisted painfully in her chest. Finally he looked up. She's coming here, into danger. Yes. Through Tres Piedras, which means... Marco's tactical mind reasserted itself through the emotional storm. The northern road, the one that passes directly by Harding's mine. We need to warn her, Elena said. Intercept her before she reaches the patrols. Marco paced the small space before the altar, the letter clutched in his hand. The operation, the dam, it has to happen tonight. We can't delay. Send Tomas, Elena suggested, the words painful but necessary. He could reach her before dawn if he leaves now. Marco stopped pacing, his face tormented by impossible choices. I haven't seen her in 5 years, believed her dead, and now your men need their leader, Elena finished for him. Sophia needs rescuing. The dam needs destroying. Your family needs protection. Not all by the same hand. Marco's gaze locked with hers, intensity burning through his confusion. I can't abandon the operation, not with Sophia captured, not with the village suffering. Then send Tomas to find Luz, Elena repeated. It's the only way. Before Marco could respond, footsteps approached the church entrance. They froze, Elena quickly extinguishing the nearest candle. The door opened, revealing Captain Miller's silhouette. Dr. Suarez, he called softly, are you here? Captain, Elena acknowledged, stepping forward. What news? Miller entered, removing his hat. He nodded to Marco, their earlier distrust now replaced by cautious alliance. Harding's bringing in explosives for a new shaft. They arrive tomorrow. At dawn, 6 crates of dynamite, minimal guard. Marco's attention sharpened. Where? The northern storage shed, furthest from the main compound. That changes things, Marco said, glancing at the rough map they'd earlier sketched on the church's worn floorboards. We won't need to breach the main gates. Just take those explosives and move them to the dam. Miller shifted uncomfortably. There's more. They've captured one of your people, a woman. Elena's heart sank. Sophia. They caught her near the western perimeter. She hasn't spoken yet, but... Miller hesitated. Reyes has methods. It won't be long. Marco's face hardened. Then we move tonight. No choice now. Elena touched his arm. And Luz. For a moment, Marco looked utterly lost. A man torn between past and present, personal longing and collective duty. Elena could see his internal struggle written in the lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. Tomas, he finally said. He'll find her, bring her to safety. He turned to Miller. Can you draw us a map of the patrol routes? Anything to help him avoid detection? Miller nodded, producing a folded paper from inside his jacket. Already done. I should return before I'm missed. If anyone questions me, I was checking perimeter security in Reyes's absence. He handed Marco the paper, then hesitated. You should know. I won't be joining you. I'll look the other way, provide what intelligence I can, but I can't actively participate in an attack on the mine. We understand, Elena said before Marco could object. You've risked enough already. After Miller departed, Elena and Marco descended to the cellar where Tomas and the remaining bandits waited. The space was cramped, thick with tension and the smell of unwashed bodies after days in hiding. When Marco handed Tomas the letter explaining the mission, the man's usually stoic expression softened. Luz alive, he whispered. It's a miracle, Primo. Find her, Marco replied, voice tight with emotion. "Keep her and my daughter safe. Tell her—" He faltered. "Tell her I'm coming for them as soon as I can." Tomas clasped Marco's shoulder. "I will guard them with my life, as they were my own family." An hour later, Tomas slipped away into the night, leaving Marco to lead the operation against the dam. Elena watched him transform. Grief and confusion locked away behind the mask of a leader planning a dangerous mission. Yet she had glimpsed the man beneath the mask, and her heart ached for his impossible choices. "You should return to your home," Marco told her as they finalized the plan. "If you're missing when the remaining guards check—" "I'm coming with you," Elena interrupted. Marco stared at her. "That's madness. Sophia is there. She'll need medical care after what they've done to her. And I know the compound from my earlier visit. It's too dangerous. This whole situation is dangerous," Elena countered. "For all of us. I made my choice days ago." Marco studied her face, seeing the determination there. Something shifted in his expression, respect perhaps, or understanding that they had both crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why risk everything for this? For us?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken complications. Elena thought of the letter from Luz, of the family that waited for Marco beyond this night's dangers. She thought of her own growing feelings, inappropriate, impossible, and the duty that transcended them. "Because it's right," she finally said. "Because the water belongs to the people, not to men like Harding. Because what they're doing to this land, to these villages, is wrong." Marco nodded slowly, accepting her answer, though perhaps sensing the deeper currents beneath it. "We leave in 2 hours, 8 men plus Isabel to create a distraction at the village well. Father Domingo will claim you're treating a difficult birth if anyone comes looking." As preparations continued, Elena found herself alone with Marco, briefly in the church's small sacristy. He was checking ammunition, hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Your wife," Elena said quietly. "How will you tell her about everything that's happened, the man you've become?" Marco's hands stilled. "I don't know." He looked up, vulnerability visible despite his attempt to mask it. "The man she knew died the day I thought I buried her. What rises from that grave may not be someone she recognizes or loves," Elena asked gently. "That too." He resumed his work, though with less certainty. 5 years changes people, changes everything. Elena wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but held herself back. "The heart remembers," she said instead, "even when circumstances change." Marco's eyes met hers, a moment of profound connection that acknowledged what neither could speak aloud. "And what does your heart remember, Dr. Suarez, from before all this?" "Peace," she answered. "Purpose. The belief that healing was enough." "And now?" "Now I understand that sometimes healing requires first breaking what is corrupt." She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the latch. "Whatever happens tonight, whatever comes after, remember that you gave these people hope when they had none, water when they were dying of thirst. As you did for me," Marco replied softly. Elena left without responding, unable to trust her voice. Outside, night had fallen completely over Santa Rosa, the village unnaturally quiet with so many men had taken away. The few remaining guards patrolled listlessly, expecting no trouble with Reyes gone and the village seemingly subdued. In her home, Elena packed medical supplies, bandages, sutures, tinctures for pain. Her hands moved automatically, while her mind swirled with emotions she couldn't afford to examine. Fear for Sophia, concern for the villagers, determination to see this mission succeed, and beneath it all a sharp ache at the thought of Marco reunited with his family. a family he deserved, a happiness she had no right to begrudge him. When Isabel arrived to escort her back to the church, Elena had composed herself into the focused healer she needed to be. The woman who had offered water to a dying bandit had transformed just as he had. Their parallel journeys had brought them to this moment of action, of conscious choice rather than desperate reaction. "It's time," Isabel whispered. Elena nodded, shouldering her medical bag. Whatever dawn brought, freedom or failure, life or death, the night's work would change everything. For Santa Rosa, for Marco, for herself. She stepped into the darkness, leaving behind the safety of hesitation. Lightning fractured the sky as Elena and Marco crouched at the edge of the mining compound. The first raindrops, hesitant, almost tentative, struck the parched earth, releasing the forgotten scent of wet dust. 8 men waited behind them in the shadows, faces grim beneath their sodden bandanas. "The storm is a gift," Marco murmured. "It will mask our sounds." Elena nodded, though her stomach twisted with tension. The medical bag at her side felt inadequate against the dangers they faced. She scanned the compound through the intensifying rain. 3 guards huddled beneath an overhang near the main gate, others likely sheltering inside. According to Miller's intelligence, Sophia was being held in a small structure near the administrative offices. "Remember," Marco told his men, voice barely audible above the brewing storm, "minimal casualties. We're here for Sophia, the explosives, and the dam, nothing else." Diego, the scarred lieutenant, nodded. 2 men on the explosives, 2 for the East Guard post, 3 to secure our escape route. You and the doctor for Sophia. Marco checked his weapons one final time. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the baked earth. "On my signal." In Santa Rosa, 6 miles south, Isabel would be starting her part of the plan, a controlled fire in an abandoned shed near the well, designed to draw the remaining guards away from their posts. Father Domingo would then sound the church bells, signaling danger and completing the distraction. Elena had no time to wonder if their diversion had succeeded. Marco's hand closed around her wrist, pulling her forward as lightning flashed again. They moved through the shadows, using the storm's increasing violence as cover. Water streamed down her face, plastering her clothes to her skin, but Elena barely noticed. Every sense was heightened, focused on the danger around them and the rhythm of Marco's movements ahead of her. They reached the storage sheds undetected. 2 of Marco's men peeled away, heading for the building Miller had indicated would contain the explosives. Elena and Marco continued toward the administrative buildings, ducking between equipment and supply crates. The small structure where Sophia was held appeared unguarded, an oversight born of arrogance or perhaps the sudden storm. Marco approached cautiously, signaling Elena to remain back. He tested the door, locked. Drawing a knife, he worked at the simple mechanism for several seconds until it yielded. Inside, darkness and the musty smell of fear. Marco produced a small lantern, lighting it to reveal a sparse room. Sophia lay on a rough cot in the corner, her face bruised, wrists bound. Elena rushed to her side. "Sophia," she whispered, touching her friend's face gently. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, momentary, panic giving way to recognition. "Elena, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Elena replied, quickly assessing her injuries. Bruised but not broken, though the marks of interrogation were evident on her face and arms. Marco cut through Sophia's bonds. "Can you walk?" "Try and stop me," Sophia responded, grimacing as she sat up. "They wanted to know where you were hiding. I told them nothing." "I never doubted it," Marco said, offering her his water flask. A sudden commotion outside froze them in place. Through the small window, Elena saw carriage, lights approaching through the downpour. A fine black lacquered carriage pulled by 4 horses, inappropriate for a mine supervisor or regional official. Harding, Marco whispered, recognition and hatred mingling in his voice. The carriage halted before the main office. Guards rushed forward with umbrellas, escorting William Harding inside. More concerning was the increased activity throughout the compound, additional guards emerging from barracks, lanterns being lit. Our timing just got worse, Marco said grimly. We need to move, now. As they eased the door open, a tremendous crack of thunder shook the ground. Lightning followed instantaneously, briefly illuminating the entire compound. In that flash, Elena saw Diego and another man sprinting from the explosives shed toward the dam, black satchels clutched to their chests. They slipped into the shadows, Sophia leaning heavily on Elena. The rain had become a deluge, water streaming across the ground in rivulets, seeking the parched earth's lowest points. Another flash revealed two of Marco's men engaged in silent, deadly struggle with guards at the eastern perimeter. "This way," Marco urged, leading them toward the prearranged escape route. They had covered half the distance when shouts erupted behind them. A guard had discovered Sophia's empty cell. "Run!" Marco ordered, supporting Sophia from the other side. They abandoned stealth for speed, racing toward the perimeter where their horses waited. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining through the rain. Elena's world narrowed to running feet, gasping breath, the weight of Sophia against her shoulder. Behind them, chaos spread through the compound. Barked orders, more gunshots, the frantic movement of men suddenly aware of intruders. They reached the fence line where Marco's men had cut an opening earlier. Two bandits waited there, horses reined nearby. Elena helped Sophia mount, then turned back toward the compound, suddenly realizing Marco was no longer beside her. Through sheets of rain, she spotted him, engaged in combat with three guards who had pursued them. His movements were fluid, economical, deadly. Two men fell. The third managed to knock Marco's gun aside, drawing a knife. Elena moved without thinking, pulling the small pistol Marco had insisted she carry. Her hands didn't shake as she aimed and fired. The guards staggered, wounded but not fatally. Marco finished the confrontation with a swift blow, then ran toward her, face a mask of surprise and respect. "You never mentioned you could shoot," he said, as they mounted the waiting horses. "You never asked," Elena replied, her body numb with the realization that she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. No time for reflection. They galloped away from the compound, Sophia clinging to her mount with desperate determination. Behind them, the alarm bells began to ring, summoning all guards to action. "The explosives!" Elena shouted over the storm's fury. "In place," Marco called back. "Diego will detonate once we're clear." They rode hard through the downpour, putting distance between themselves and the mine. Elena's medical training registered the danger signs in Sophia. Pallor beneath her bruises, the slight slump in her posture, but stopping was impossible. The storm reached full fury, lightning striking, close enough to make their horses rear in terror. Flash floods were forming in arroyos that had been bone dry for months, the parched earth unable to absorb the sudden deluge. Marco signaled a halt on a ridge overlooking the dam. Below them, the massive structure stood black against occasional lightning flashes, the artificial lake behind it swelling with storm runoff. "We wait for the signal," Marco said, helping Sophia from her horse. Elena tended to Sophia as best she could, cleaning wounds and offering water. "The fever will come. Later," she warned. "We need to get you proper treatment." Sophia gripped her hand. "Was it worth it? What I saw at the mine?" "Your information saved lives," Elena assured her. Marco stood at the ridge's edge, watching the dam through the curtain of rain. Time stretched, marked only by thunderclaps and lightning flashes. "Something's wrong," he finally said. "It should have happened by now." As if in answer, a horse emerged from the darkness. Diego, his face bloodied, clinging to his saddle. "Trouble," he gasped as Marco helped him down. "Guards discovered us setting the charges. Raphael is dead. I got most of the explosives placed. but had to light the fuse early. "How early?" Marco demanded. Diego's expression was grim. "Minutes. Not enough time for us to reach safe distance." Marco turned back toward the dam, calculation evident in his stance. "New plan. We ride east, higher ground. Now." They mounted quickly, Diego sharing Elena's horse. They had just crested the next ridge when the world erupted behind them. The explosion sent shock waves through the ground, strong enough to make their horses stumble. Turning, they witnessed the dam's center collapsing, concrete and timber giving way to the immense pressure behind it. Water, so long contained, so long denied its natural course, burst free with apocalyptic force. The roar drowned even the thunder as the lake emptied itself into the valley below, sweeping away equipment, buildings, everything in its path. "Mother of God," Sophia whispered. Elena watched in awe and horror as the water surged forth, unstoppable in its newfound freedom. Mining structures disappeared beneath the flood, torn away like children's toys. The destruction was total, immediate, and terrifying in its elemental power. Yet amid the chaos, Elena felt a strange peace descend. The water would flow down the natural watershed, restoring streams and springs throughout the region. Villages would drink, fields would grow. A balance, so long disturbed, would begin to right itself. Marco watched silently beside her, his expression complex. Satisfaction at their success, sorrow for the violence that had made it necessary, concern for what would come next. "Reyes will know it was us," he said finally. "Yes," Elena agreed. "He'll come for Santa Rosa with everything he has. Then we'll be ready." The certainty in Elena's voice surprised even her. Marco studied her face in the lightning flashes, seeming to truly see the transformation that had occurred. He nodded slowly. "We should move. Get Sophia to safety." As they rode through the storm toward Santa Rosa, Elena felt the gravity of what they had done and what still lay ahead. They had broken a dam, set water free, committed an act of destruction that was simultaneously an act of creation. There would be consequences. Reyes would not accept this defeat without brutal retaliation. Miles away, in his command tent at Agua Fria, Comandante Reyes received the news of the dam's destruction with cold fury. The messenger, drenched, terrified, knelt before him as he absorbed the catastrophic report. "Santa Rosa," he said, voice deadly quiet. "It can be no one else." His lieutenants shifted nervously as he rose, eyes burning with methodical rage. "Prepare every available man. We move at first light." "Sir," one officer ventured, "the storm will have passed by dawn." Reyes's tone cut like a blade. "And so will Santa Rosa's existence as anything but an example of what happens to those who defy federal authority." He turned to his desk, unfolding a map of the region. "This ends tomorrow. All of it." As Reyes plotted his revenge, the waters continued to flow, finding ancient channels, filling empty streambeds, bringing life back to a land too long deprived. Nature had reasserted itself through human action, destruction leading to renewal, violence to restoration. Elena, Marco, and their companions rode through the night, racing the waters that flowed beside them, waters that would reach Santa Rosa before they did, heralds of both liberation and the coming storm of retribution. Dawn broke over Santa Rosa. With golden clarity, the storm's wrath spent overnight. Villagers emerged from their homes to discover a miracle, water flowing through the once dry streambed that curved along the village's western edge. Children splashed in puddles, their laughter a sound almost forgotten in the long months of drought. Women filled jugs directly from the revitalized stream, marveling at its sweet abundance. But Elena had no time to celebrate. From the clinic doorway, she watched Marco directing villagers and his remaining men in preparing defenses. Adobe walls became battlements, carts and barrels formed barricades at strategic intersections. The joy of water's return mingled with grim determination. Everyone understood what was coming. "How long do we have?" Elena asked when Marco approached, his face drawn from the night's exertions. "Reyes is gathering forces from 3 garrisons." Marco's voice was steady, but exhaustion shadowed his eyes. "By midday, perhaps sooner." Elena nodded, already cataloguing supplies in her mind. "I'm moving the wounded to the church. More space, stronger walls." "I've assigned 4 men to help you," Marco replied. Father Domingo offered the sacristy for a surgical area. They parted without further words, each focused on the urgent tasks ahead. Elena supervised the careful transport of Sophia and 2 injured bandits to the church, where Isabel and several village women had already prepared pallets and torn linens into bandages. As she organized her medical supplies, Elena watched the village transform. Men who had spent their lives tending fields now received instruction in the defensive tactics of street fighting. Grandmother Ortiz, her back bent from decades of labor, sat calmly on her doorstep, casting bullets from melted pewter. Miguel and the other children darted between buildings, carrying messages and supplies with solemn purpose. Just before noon, a rider appeared on the northern ridge. Not a soldier, but a farmer from the neighboring village of San Isidro. He galloped into the plaza where Marco stood, conferring with Diego. "The water has returned to San Isidro," the man announced, loud, enough for all to hear. "We know what you've done. 30 men are coming to stand with you." Before Marco could respond, another rider arrived from the east. Similar news, similar pledge. By early afternoon, nearly 60 men from surrounding communities had joined Santa Rosa's defenders. These were not warriors, but ordinary people driven to extraordinary action by the prospect of freedom from Harding's water tyranny. Marco received them with a mixture of gratitude and concern. "You understand what joining us means," he told their leaders. "Reyes will show no mercy." A weathered rancher from Tres Piedras answered for them all. "We've lived under their mercy for years, Vega. Our children thirsty while our streams were stolen. Better to die standing than live kneeling." As the volunteers were positioned throughout the village, Captain Miller arrived with his small contingent of American soldiers. The captain's face was carefully neutral as he approached Marco and Elena in the plaza. "Comandante Reyes approaches with 60 federales," he stated flatly. "His orders are to make an example of Santa Rosa." "And your orders, Captain?" Marco asked. Miller's jaw tightened. "To observe and protect American interests." "Harding's interests, you mean?" Elena said. "Not anymore." Miller handed Marco a sealed document. "I've sent a full report to my superiors about Harding's illegal water diversion. The Treaty of 1874 specifically prohibits interfering with natural watercourses that cross the border." Marco studied Miller's face. "That doesn't answer my question. Where do you stand today, Captain?" Miller removed his hat, running a hand through graying hair. "My men and I will take position at the church to protect the wounded and non-combatants." Though carefully worded to maintain military neutrality, the message was clear. Miller would not fight against them. Elena exchanged a meaningful glance with Marco before returning to her preparations at the church. Father Domingo worked alongside her, his cassock sleeves rolled up as he arranged supplies. "Strange days," the priest murmured. "When bandits, villagers, and American soldiers stand together." "Strange days indeed," Elena agreed. "When giving people water they need to survive becomes an act of rebellion." An hour later, the federal forces appeared on the northern ridge, an imposing line of mounted soldiers followed by men on foot. Even at a distance, Reyes's rigid posture was unmistakable at their head. The federales set up positions surrounding Santa Rosa, their movements revealing military precision. When their encirclement was complete, Reyes himself rode forward under a white flag, halting just within speaking distance of the village's northern barricade. Marco walked out to meet him, unarmed, but for the knife at his belt. "Surrender yourself. And your men," Reyes called, his voice carrying across the dusty space between them, "and the villagers will be spared." "Your word means nothing," Marco replied. "Not after Tres Piedras, not after your alliance with Harding." Reyes's face hardened. "Then you condemn these people to death." "These people," Marco countered, his voice rising so all could hear, "have already been condemned to thirst, to poverty, to slow death while their water was stolen. Today, they choose to fight instead." "You have 1 hour to reconsider," Reyes said coldly, turning his horse back toward his lines. No one in Santa Rosa expected the hour to be granted. Indeed, within minutes, federal soldiers began advancing on the village from multiple directions. The siege of Santa Rosa had begun. What followed was a day of blood and courage. Reyes's men attacked in waves, seeking to overwhelm the defenders through superior numbers. But Marco had positioned his forces cleverly, using the village's narrow streets to funnel attackers into killing zones. The federales, accustomed to open battlefield tactics, found themselves frustrated by an enemy who seemed to vanish between attacks, only to reappear from rooftops and windows. In the church, Elena worked without rest. Wounded defenders were brought to her alongside fallen federales. She treated them all, moving between pallets with bloodied hands and unwavering focus. Isabel assisted tirelessly, her earlier moral certainties transformed into the simple clarity of compassion in crisis. Father Domingo moved among the wounded, offering comfort and last rites when needed. During a brutal afternoon assault, he ventured outside to help drag an injured village boy to safety. A federal bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Elena stabilized the priest, her movements efficient despite her exhaustion. "That was foolish, Father," she scolded gently. "Christ enters the battlefield," he replied through gritted teeth, "not just the church." By evening, the federal attacks had slowed, then ceased altogether. Reyes withdrew his forces beyond rifle range, but maintained their encirclement. In the plaza, Marco conferred with his lieutenants and the leaders from neighboring villages. Their losses had been significant. 12 dead, 20 wounded. But Reyes had fared worse with at least 30 casualties. "He'll bring in reinforcements overnight," Marco warned. "Tomorrow will be harder." As darkness fell, Elena made her rounds one final time. The church floor was covered with the wounded, their groans and occasional cries punctuating the eerie silence that had descended. Captain Miller stood guard at the entrance, his men positioned to protect the makeshift hospital. "You've chosen your side after all," Elena observed as she checked the bandage on Father Domingo's shoulder. Miller's weathered face revealed little. "I've chosen to prevent a massacre of civilians, that's all." "It's enough," she replied simply. Outside, Marco moved among the defenders, offering encouragement, adjusting positions, ensuring the wounded were comfortable. Elena watched him through the church doorway, his natural leadership now expressed not in raids and resistance, but in the organized defense of a community. The outlaw had become something else entirely, something the wanted posters could never have captured. As Marco finished speaking with a group of village defenders, a small boy, one of their messengers, ran up to him. Elena couldn't hear the exchange, but she saw Marco's body stiffen in surprise. After a brief conversation, he strode quickly toward the church. "Elena," he called softly as he entered. His face was a study in conflicted emotion. "Tomas has returned. He's in the hills south of the village." "With Luz?" Elena asked, her heart constricting despite her efforts to remain detached. Marco nodded. "And my daughter, they're waiting in the shepherd's hut." His eyes, usually so decisive, revealed profound uncertainty. "I should be here. The defense has capable leaders," Elena finished for him. She wiped her bloodied hands on her apron. "Diego can command until morning. Your family has waited 5 years, Marco. Don't make them wait through this night." Marco's gaze searched her face, perhaps seeking permission, perhaps seeking something more complex. "Will you come with me?" he asked quietly. "Sophia is stable, and Miller's men can help with the wounded. I would like you to meet them." The request startled Elena. She wanted to refuse, to protect herself from witnessing the reunion that would forever close the unspoken possibilities between them. Yet she found herself nodding. "Give me 10 minutes to organize things here," she said. As Elena gave instructions to Isabel and checked her patience one last time, she steeled herself for what was to come. Outside, the night sky was brilliant with stars, the storm's passage leaving crystalline clarity in its wake. Santa Rosa lay quiet, its defenders resting while they could, water flowing once more through its heart. Marco waited for her at the church door, his face illuminated by starlight, a man poised between past and future, between the battle behind him and the reunion ahead. Together, they slipped past the southern barricades, moving through shadows toward the hills where Marco's lost family waited. The shepherd's hut stood silhouetted against the night sky, a humble structure of stone and timber that now contained Marco's past and possibly his future. Elena hung back as they approached, suddenly reluctant to witness the reunion she had insisted Marco pursue. "She may not want a stranger present," Elena said softly. Marco paused, turning to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was complex. Gratitude, anxiety, and something deeper that neither of them dared name. "You're not a stranger, Elena. You're the reason I'm alive to see this moment." Before she could respond, the hut's door opened. Tomas emerged first, rifle still in hand, despite the relative safety of their location. He nodded to Marco, then stepped aside, revealing a slender woman with night-dark hair and eyes that instantly found Marco's face. Time seemed to suspend. Itself as husband and wife, regarded each other across 5 years of absence, grief and change. Then Luz moved forward, her steps halting at first, then quickening until she stood before Marco. "You're alive," she whispered, raising one trembling hand to touch his face, as if confirming his solidity. "I believed Tomas, but still—" Marco covered her hand with his own. "I buried you," he said, voice raw with emotion. "I mourned you for 5 years. Tears spilled down Luz's cheeks. "They came to kill us all. I had to disappear to protect her. They were watching you. If you had known—" "Mama!" A small voice called from the doorway. A girl of perhaps 6 years stood there, dressed in simple traveling clothes, her dark eyes, Marco's eyes, wary but curious. Marco stared at his daughter as if beholding a miracle. In many ways he was. The child's existence represented everything he had thought forever lost: family, future, a reason beyond vengeance to continue living. "Magdalena," Luz said, reaching back to beckon the girl forward. "This is your father." The child approached cautiously, studying Marco with solemn intensity. "Mama said you were a ranchero, but Tomas says you're El Cazador now." Marco knelt to meet his daughter at eye level. "I was a ranchero. Then I became something. Now I'm trying to become something better." Magdalena considered this with childlike gravity. "Are you still my papa?" "Always," Marco said, his voice breaking. "Even when I didn't know you existed, I was your papa." The girl stepped forward then, allowing Marco to embrace her. Over her small head, his eyes found Elena's, filled with wonder and anguish in equal measure. Elena forced a smile, then turned away, giving the family privacy for their reunion. She found Tomas standing watch nearby, his weathered face revealing rare emotion. "You've done well, bringing them safely here," she said. Tomas nodded. The girl is remarkable, brave, like both her parents. He paused, studying Elena. It's complicated now. Life always is, Elena replied, though her heart ached with a loss she had no right to feel. Inside the hut, by the light of a single lantern, Marco listened as Luz explained the years of separation. After the attack on their ranch, she had been badly wounded but not fatally. A sympathetic servant had hidden her, then helped her escape when she learned she was with child. I wanted to contact you, Luz said, her hand clutching Marco's. But they were watching, always watching. Harding's men, then Reyes's soldiers. They believed you might lead them to me if I was alive. So you let me believe you were dead. There was no accusation in Marco's voice, only the weight of lost years. To keep our daughter safe. Luz's gaze was direct, unapologetic in her choice. I did what I had to do, as you did. Magdalena had fallen asleep on a pallet in the corner, exhausted from the journey and the emotional reunion. Marco watched her sleeping form with reverent attention. What happens now? He asked finally. Santa Rosa is under siege. Reyes will attack at dawn with everything he has. I heard, Luz said. People spoke of it all along our journey. The Bandito, who destroyed Harding's Dam, the village that defied the federal troops. They spoke of water flowing again, Tomas added, entering the hut with Elena, of villages joining together against Reyes and Harding. Marco's expression shifted, responsibility displacing emotion. I need to return before dawn. We'll come with you, Luz said. No. Marco's response was immediate, definitive. It's too dangerous. Luz's eyes flashed with familiar determination. Our daughter has traveled weeks to find her father. I won't have her lose him again the same day they meet. While they argued, Elena slipped outside, unable to bear witnessing their fierce connection. The night air cooled her flushed face as she gazed toward Santa Rosa, where small fires marked the defensive lines. In the federal camp beyond, more fires burned, many more. Dr. Suarez. Elena turned to find Luz standing behind her, a shawl pulled tight against the night chill. Senora Vega, Elena acknowledged, struggling to keep her voice neutral. He told me what you did, Luz said. Finding him, treating his wounds when you knew who he was. I'm a doctor. It's what we do. Luz stepped closer. Is it what doctors do, to join an outlaw's raid against a federal dam? To treat soldiers who would arrest you if they knew your role in the attack? Elena remained silent, unable to explain her choices to this woman who had sacrificed so much to protect her child. I see how he looks at you, Luz continued, her tone softening, and how you look at him. I never intended, Elena began. Of course not. Luz's smile was sad, but lacking in recrimination. Neither of you did. Life is what happens when our intentions mean nothing. They stood in silence, two women connected by a man neither could fully claim in the current circumstances. What will you do now? Elena finally asked. What I've always done, Luz replied. Protect my daughter, support Marco, find a way forward. She studied Elena's face in the moonlight. And you, Doctor? Heal who I can, fight when I must. Luz nodded, seeming to find something satisfactory in Elena's answer. Come. They've decided. Inside the hut, Marco had yielded to Luz's insistence. They would return to Santa Rosa together, finding shelter in the church with the wounded, while Marco rejoined the defense. As they prepared to leave, Magdalena awoke, immediately alert in the way of children, accustomed to danger. When she saw Elena, her dark eyes, so like her father's, assessed the stranger with precocious perception. Are you the doctor who saved my papa? She asked directly. Elena knelt beside the child. Yes, though he saved himself many times since then. Magdalena nodded, accepting this. Mama says doctors fix people when they're broken. Are you going to fix the village too? I'm trying, Elena said softly. We all are. The journey back to Santa Rosa was tense but uneventful. They arrived to find the village prepared for the coming assault. Diego reported that Reyes had received reinforcements, another 20 men at least. Worse, William Harding had arrived with a dozen private mercenaries. He was seen conferring with Reyes, Diego explained, agitated, insistent. In the church, where Elena resumed tending the wounded, Isabel confirmed this intelligence. One of Miller's men overheard them arguing. Harding said something about millions in investments being threatened if the rebellion spreads. Captain Miller himself appeared shortly before midnight, his face grim. Reyes plans a full assault at dawn, three-pronged attack. Harding's mercenaries will lead the western approach. Your men? Marco asked. I've sent a dispatch to Fort He, Breckenridge, detailing Harding's violations of water treaties, Miller replied. But military communication moves slowly. For now, my orders remain to protect American interests. And how do you interpret those orders, Captain? Elena asked, bandaging a young defender's arm. Miller's weathered face revealed momentary uncertainty. I've positioned my men to prevent civilian casualties. Beyond that. He left the implication hanging. As Miller departed, the church door opened again. Luz entered with Magdalena, their arrival causing a ripple of whispers among the wounded. The presence of Marco Vega's family, long believed dead, spread through the church like wildfire. Marco introduced them briefly to Isabel and Sophia, then guided them to a small alcove where Elena had prepared space. The contrast was stark. This small family unit amid the chaos of war preparations, the intimate amid the communal crisis. Elena worked through the night, checking bandages, administering medicines, offering comfort where cure was impossible. Occasionally, her path crossed Marco's as he moved between the church and the defensive positions. Each time, their eyes met with unspoken understanding. Their connection had shifted irrevocably, deepened beyond personal feelings into something larger. Near dawn, Elena stepped outside for a moment's respite. The eastern sky showed the first hint of lightning, stars fading as day approached. In the federal camp, movement was already visible, soldiers forming into units, weapons being distributed. It will be soon, Marco said, joining her in the doorway. Yes, Elena agreed, too exhausted for pretense. Are you afraid? Not of dying, he answered truthfully, of failing those who trusted me. Elena turned to face him fully. You've already succeeded. The water flows again. Villages stand together rather than suffer alone. Whatever happens, today that remains. Marco's eyes held hers. Elena, A commotion at the village perimeter interrupted him. A rider approached at speed, not from the federal lines but from the west, where the American fort lay. As they watched, Captain Miller hurried to intercept the messenger, accepting a sealed document. Miller read it quickly, his posture straightening. He conferred briefly with his sergeant, then strode purposefully toward the church, his face transformed by grim satisfaction. Dr. Suarez, Senor Vega, he called as he approached. It seems the siege dynamics have changed. What's happened? Marco demanded. Miller held up the official document. Orders from Fort Breckenridge. I am to place William Harding under immediate arrest for violations of the 1874 Water Rights Treaty and transport him to territorial authorities. Elena and Marco exchanged stunned glances as Miller continued, American forces are explicitly forbidden from participating in or supporting any action against civilians protecting their water rights. The implications cascaded through Elena's mind. Reyes, deprived of both Harding's mercenaries and American support, his corrupt alliance exposed. Dawn approaches, Captain, she said. Will you execute these orders immediately? Miller's Smile was cold. "With the greatest pleasure, Dr. Suarez, with the greatest pleasure." As he strode back toward his men, Marco turned to Elena, hope and caution warring in his expression. "This changes everything." "And nothing," she replied. "Reyes will still attack. But without Harding, without American support, his position is compromised." The church door opened behind them. Luz stood there, Magdalena at her side. "Marco, what's happening?" Marco looked between the two women, his wife with their child, and the doctor who had saved him and fought beside him. Past and future, personal and communal, the private happiness he deserved and the public justice he championed. "A chance," he said finally. "We have a chance." Dawn broke over Santa Rosa with golden clarity as Captain Miller stood at the village entrance, reading charges against William Harding for illegal diversion of international waterways, bribery of officials, and violations of the 1874 treaty. Harding's face drained of color as American soldiers placed him in restraints. Beyond them, in the federal camp, confusion rippled. Through Reyes's forces, the commander rode forward, rage contorting his features. "This is Mexican territory, Miller. You have no jurisdiction." "My jurisdiction extends to American citizens violating treaties," Miller replied coolly, "and to ensuring American forces don't support illegal actions." From the church steps, Elena and Marco watched the confrontation unfold. Harding's mercenaries were already melting away toward the hills, leaving Reyes's position suddenly vulnerable. "Now," Marco said softly, throughout Santa Rosa, defenders emerged from their positions, not attacking but standing united. Villagers alongside bandits, farmers beside former outlaws, women and elders joining the front lines. The message was unmistakable, not a criminal band, but a community defending its rights. Among the federal troops, murmurs spread. Many were simple soldiers, with families in villages not unlike Santa Rosa. Some had heard rumors of Reyes's corruption, his partnership with American interests against his own people. The first shot came from within the federal ranks, a young lieutenant firing his pistol into the air. "I joined the army to protect Mexico, not to steal water from Mexican villages," he shouted. "I will not fight for Harding's gold." His declaration triggered a cascade of soldiers laying down their arms. Not all. A core of loyalists remained around Reyes, opening fire on the village. Bullets shattered the church windows as Elena and Isabel dragged wounded men behind stone pillars. "We need to move them," Elena shouted. "The sacristy, stone walls." The church door burst open as Luz appeared, Magdalena behind her. Without hesitation, she moved to help Elena with a wounded man. "Where is Marco?" Elena asked. "Where he needs to be," Luz replied simply. Outside, Marco moved through the scattered skirmishes, directing defenders. "Capture, don't kill, when possible." From the northern barricade, he spotted Reyes's core group beginning a retreat. The commander himself was clearly planning to escape and regroup. With Diego and two men, Marco circled through the village outskirts, cutting off Reyes's escape. Through a narrow alley. The confrontation was brief but vicious. Reyes's men surrendered quickly when surrounded, but the commander fought on, emptying his pistol before charging Marco with his sword. Their duel became the battle's centerpiece, other skirmishes slowing as combatants turned to watch. When Marco disarmed Reyes, forcing him to his knees, a hush fell across the village. "Finish it, Vega," Reyes spat. "Be the murderer they claim you are." Marco stood over him, pistol aimed at Reyes's heart. 5 years of pursuit concentrated. In this single moment, everything in him cried for vengeance, for his father, for the villagers terrorized, for Sophia's torture. Then his eyes found Elena, who had emerged from the church. Beside her stood Luz and Magdalena, his past and future watching his choice. Beyond them, the villagers waited, their next step determined by his. Marco lowered his weapon. "Bind him!" he ordered Diego. "He faces justice for his crimes, real justice, not revenge." The remaining resistance collapsed with Reyes's capture. By mid-morning, the siege of Santa Rosa was over, though at high cost. 8 more defenders lost, dozens wounded. But as water continued to flow through the restored streambed, as neighboring villages sent food and supplies in solidarity, cautious victory spread through the community. 3 days later, Father Domingo stood at the river's edge, his wounded, shoulder bandaged, but his stance resolute as he performed long-delayed baptisms for the village children. "Today we witness not just the return of water," he announced, "but a baptism of our shared future." When Magdalena's turn came, Marco and Luz stood together as Father Domingo poured the clear stream water over their daughter's head. "May you grow in grace," the priest intoned, "as these waters grow in strength." Elena watched from a slight distance, her heart full of complicated joy. The past weeks had transformed them all, herself from reluctant healer to revolutionary, Marco from vengeful outlaw to community leader. As families dispersed after the ceremony, Marco approached her with Luz and Magdalena. "We've been talking about what comes next," he said. "The regional governor has offered me a position overseeing water rights enforcement for the border districts." "From bandito to bureaucrat?" Elena raised her eyebrows. "From fighting the system to changing it from within," Marco corrected. "The water belongs to the people, all the people." "Will be based in Chihuahua City," Luz continued, "but the position requires a medical advisor familiar with the region's health needs." Elena's breath caught as she understood. "You want me to continue the work you've already begun," Marco finished, "on a larger scale." Before Elena could respond, a commotion arose at the village entrance. Officials in formal attire approached, led by a distinguished gentleman whose insignia marked him as a representative from Mexico City. "It seems our small rebellion has drawn attention from the capital," Father Domingo observed. Elena glanced at Marco and Luz, the family reunited through struggle, now offering her a way forward that honored what had passed between them all. "We have time to decide," she said, turning to greet the officials. "The waters have returned, and with them, all manner of new possibilities. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us."